Hello, I'm going to talk to you today about space, one of my favorite subjects. I have a small architectural studio. Let's try not to stand in, maybe I can use this. Sorry. Then I don't have to stand in front of the picture all the time. There. I have a small architectural studio together with another architect called Majbrit Skjoldborg. And we both graduated here from the School of Architecture in Aarhus, specializing in experimental architecture. The studio is built around an open, co-creative culture that includes our professional network, our customers, and other business partners. This allows us to keep the studio really small, and that gives us a lot greater flexibility and more freedom, because we don't have all these monthly paychecks to pay to people. Today I'm going to tell you a short story about the grid, or the box. I'm going to show you some new types of spaces that start breaking free from the grid. And then I'm going to introduce you to some of the work we do in We Make Space. The perpendicular grid is widely spread in our physical world. It's the main system to organize and express the physical world as we live in it today. We came back, if you go some 100 years back, we came from a place where it was the forces of nature and the chaos that came with them that was predominant, and therefore we tried the best we could to tame nature, to get a grip on it. We came from a place of fear and superstition, and the base of our life were God and morality. And then a few hundred years ago that changed. It was replaced by science and the rational human, and order was created by measuring the world, by classification and by filing. And sometimes they even went to really extreme measures to find out how the world works and what we can do with it. Thereby the scientific mindset became the dominating view of the world. And at the same time, the perpendicular grid has become the predominant expression in our physical world. So those two are, as I see it, linked. The grid we have applied everywhere. We have put a grid on the moon. We have put a grid across the surface of the Earth so we can find our way around. We have even divided states and somewhere in Africa countries by the perpendicular grid. When we commercialize the surface of the Earth with agribusiness, we often or almost always use the grid, put it down over the surface. Even our leisure time is sometimes put into squares. Same thing when we build our cities. We use the grid to organize a big part of our cities. When we divide housing plots, we do it with squares and boxes. Yeah, sometimes we go to the extreme. And the buildings themselves are also governed by the grid, as you can see here from the old post office in Amsterdam. And here a newer one, the library in Malmö by Henning Larsen. And all these grid buildings they inspire a very perpendicular interior. When you take a bookshelf into a building that is so much dominated by the grid, it's almost impossible to put it not perpendicular. And thereby you get these interior spaces that is also a replica of the outside. And for many, many years, this was what happened. So it was self-perpetuating, more and more grid. And let me say, for sure, there's nothing wrong with the grid. There's nothing wrong with boxes. It's a great shape. It gives us lots of possibilities. But unfortunately, it has become the almost only shape in our built environment. And thereby, we exclude ourselves from the myriad of other possible shapes that exist in the universe. And we think that's a great shame. So let's keep working with the boxes a bit, but also let's try to bring in a lot of new and interesting shapes. I'm going to show you a few examples from around the world of buildings and spaces starting to break free from the grid. Some of these were found on a great website called inhabitat.com, and others were found on trendhunter.com. These are two websites where you can find more of what's being done around the world that is definitely out of the box. Some, of course, we found in reality. I'm sorry the pictures are a bit pale, but I hope you can still get the point. This is a building called the D Gallery by Point B Design. The big point of this building is that it's very different according to where you see it from. These three pictures are actually the same building. Thereby the building is really lively, and it changes a lot the notion of the building as you use it and walk around in it. This other example, the Edgeland House by Bercy Chen Studio, is an example of how we start to integrate our buildings with nature and start to live and interact closer with nature. Before, nature was something to be battled and something to be tamed. Now we have tamed it and in a lot of places tamed it too much. And now we are starting to find the qualities of nature and to strengthen our new relation with nature. This other example is the Klein Bottle House by McBride Charles Ryan. This is one of my favorite examples, so there's quite a few pictures from that. It's a really great building, landed from I don't know what planet, but I would like to live on that planet. So I hope we bring it in here. This is an interior view. Again, I'm sorry for we tried to create some shades with these parasols. So it's a lot better than it was before, but still it can be a bit hard to see some of the darker pictures. But still you get an idea of what kind of space it is. The same architects created this cloud house where the interior space is quite unique. And then one of my favorite examples is the Sevilla Pavilion by Jürgen Meyer. A great structure in the center of a big square in Sevilla with lots of functions integrated in it. There's a restaurant up in it and a lot of shades under it, and you can walk above it. And it just gives a great sense of new space to the very old town of Sevilla. Here in Denmark, we also have actually a lot of examples, and recently a lot of examples has been starting to come finally. I just have a few of them. This is actually a very ordinary building. It's just an ordinary square building, but just by putting on these angled balconies, you give the building a totally new way of expressing itself to the surroundings. So that's a great start, I think, from Ørestaden, designed by JJW architects. Another Danish example is the Park Superkilen by Big, Topotec 1 and Superflex. That shows a very new way to approach space that is a lot more democratic, a lot more lateral in the way it approaches space and city space. Another great example that I can recommend visiting next time you're in Copenhagen. And then my favorite Danish example is the People's Meeting Dome that was built at Folkemødet at Bornholm last year by Christopher Teilgaard and Benny Jebsen, who are also the two architects who were consulting on this Dome of Vision that we are in right now. And this is really a great piece of work. An interior shot here. And of course, we're standing here in this dome, and right behind us is the iceberg, designed by Zebra, which is also a really good example of exciting new architecture. So if you haven't been out there yet, go check it out. We see some tendencies of today that is shaping the future of space and building. The first is extensive global exchange in all senses. Then there's a growing acknowledgement of the many different kinds of intelligence that we possess. And then the third is an evolutionary new kind of lateral thinking. Of course, there are many others. I just picked these three, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them. With global exchange, we mean the great mix of both mindsets, technology, knowledge and references that are coming in now because we start to move freely around the world and we start to inspire each other freely. That has given us a change where before we always architecturally we had to reference to the local history, but now we're moving from that to a global synthesis inspiring totally new types of spaces. You can say that new inspirations are now being allowed around the world. The other one, acknowledgement of the many different kinds of intelligences, that gives us a new demand for more multi-performing and more flexible spaces. Spaces that move a bit away from the rational and a bit more towards the sensory, the differentiated and the flexible. And then can contain many different types of activities and behaviors and needs. And that is now mostly seen in the educational sector, but soon it's going to start moving out to the rest of the society, I think. Actually, this Dome of Vision is a good example of that. If you want to know more about the many intelligences, there is Howard Gardner, who has spent his whole life exploring that field. Then there is the lateral thinking. Lateral thinking is a non-hierarchical, side-by-side way of thinking. And that moves us from a unilateral, a rational, economical, profession-based view to a more bioconscious view of the world, where we start to create solutions combining both the left and the right side of our brain, the rational and the creative, and start to do that more in co-creation and in open innovation. For more on that, you can check a guy called Jeremy Rifkin, who also has a lot of other interesting points. Then I'm going to show you some of the work we do in We Make Space. We have been trying to get a grip of what's happening and done that in many different ways. Here's some diagrams where we explore what it is we come from with the boxed spaces, how you can break up the box spaces and make new possibilities in them by introducing new elements into an existing space. And of course then how you can do if you build a space from the ground up and how you can start to create new possibilities. One of the things we found is that by working with shifting surfaces, it's a very simple thing that gives a really big effect. This is an example of the way we normally build. We normally build our spaces with very defined corners that put a boundary to the space. You can easily see the space stops here. You can't go anywhere from there. But if you take these surfaces and start opening them up, you get a totally different kind of feeling in this space. You get a feeling that even though it's a closed space, this is a space I can go explore in. This is a space where I can dive into and expand myself. Very different from this one. An example of this is a project where we made recently at the main library at the foyer. Flexible exhibition space where they're trying out new things before they move down to the new building. So this is just when we finished. It's basically an old school square space, but we added all these new layers, creating an environment where you can move around and explore. And also with these walls, they're movable, so they can all the time move them around, creating new kinds of spaces. This is from the opening. Again, I apologize for the pale pictures, but at least this one you can go see for yourself if you have the time. It's in the main library. These same walls we used in other versions for other temporary cultural projects. This is from the next exhibition in Ridehuset a few years ago. A few pictures from that. When we started out in our studio, we mostly did temporary spaces for cultural events and cultural settings. That was the place where we were allowed to start exploring these new spaces. And we did that a lot with fabric structures. So we explored those quite a bit in a lot of different kinds of environments. This is a theater stage set. This is a conference. And then we started to do more permanent ones. This is from the Gern Library, where we did this children's corner that is, as far as I know, still standing today. And that brought us into the world of libraries. And we then started to do permanent reorganizing of mostly school libraries. This is from the school library in Højer, in the most southern part of Denmark, where we introduced, this was before just an ordinary, totally white space with a lot of bookshelves standing perpendicular to the space. So we reorganized the whole space, putting new colors in, adding new elements, and adding, first of all, a lot of different ways of being in the space, different ways you can sit, different ways you can interact. And the funny thing is that we made a survey on the school, and we found that even though that we introduced all these new colors, all these new layers, the actual effect is that, first of all, the space is being used more than twice as much as there was before. They move all the school activities into the space. At the same time, the noise level in the space has gone down dramatically. The children are a lot more quiet, they're a lot more concentrated, and when we asked the children themselves, the teachers were really surprised, because they thought these children, this was 9th grade children, and they were close to impossible, but they all answered that this space gives me, it inspires me to study, it gives me great pleasure to be in here, and so on and so forth. So that was really encouraging for us. So therefore we kept doing it. And this is some more pictures from this library. Also a design from the library, a kind of furniture that you can use in a lot of different ways. We call it thought steps, and it's, as you can see, for all ages. You just find the level that suits you. This is another design we made for another school library in Nordborg on Als. We call it Space on Wheels. So these very expressive partition walls, and they're put on wheels. So at least one time a week, the librarians move the walls around, and in that way, it's always a new setting that meets the student when they come into the school. We have also been exploring into outdoor follies or non-functional structures, as you can see here from Rådhusparken here in Aarhus. And we found out that even though we didn't design them for a function, they actually had one. Because every time someone was sitting in the park, once they were there, they were always sitting against the structures. So that was kind of funny. And being out here in the Central Park, that brings me to the first bigger architectural project we did. We did that from 2004 to 2008. Unfortunately, the project has been standing still, but we still hope that someone will find it and invigorate it again. It's a project concerning Ridehuset and all the functions that's missing in Ridehuset today in order to make it an exciting and flexible culture house of the future. Ridehuset is preserved by law, so we had to approach it carefully. So the way we did it was to go underground with most of our new functions, and then pop the building up out into the park, and pop the roof up into the square. In that way, we could do an expressive building, adding a lot of new functions, but still do it in a way so it wasn't in the way for the old building, and in a way so it doesn't touch the old building. All the connections are underground. And then inside the old Ridehus, we introduced a lot of flexible elements that could be used both as stages, as seating for audience, as space within space, and so on and so forth. And with a lot of floor elevators that could move up and down, and also move all these big structures down into the new storage underground, so the space can be almost completely empty again. Then the next project I want to show you is one of our newest projects. It's a green performing microcity called Art Epi. This is a project that is concerning green knowledge, art culture, and innovative architecture. It's thought as a movable microcity that are organized around a series of sustainable and environmental and resource conscious building activities. The buildings in the microcity are thought to be modular and adaptive, with individual and flexible work and habitation zones. And these are connected together in an infrastructural network with shared facilities for production, exhibition, communication, stage areas, and other places for exchange of knowledge. The thought is that in Art Epi, microcity artists and scientists, understood in the broadest sense of the words for both cases, should work side by side, developing green knowledge and resource-conscious productions of art and culture. And then the results and the processes should be shown in the city. The city is going to travel around Europe to at least one new country every year, and then in 2017 come back to this region when we have the Capital of Culture. It'll be a living example of a co-creating sustainable future society that is going to travel around Europe. It's a very big project, and I don't have time to go into it in detail today. I'm just going to tell you about one element from the projects, which is the modules to live, work, and exchange in. We call them Unifying Units, and they are a micro unit that is basically one unit is suited for the action space that one person needs. It's 16 square meters. There's flexible furniture in it. The table can come up against the wall. The bed can come down over the bench, so on and so forth. And then we have these folding doors, 3 of them, so you can open up the space completely, or you can close it in. Here's an interior view from the space where you see the bed folded up, the table folded down, and the doors that can open up and in. At the same time, we have these connectors that can take your door. You can put the connector up, and then your door turns into a window. In that way, you can either open up completely, be really open and really interacting with your surrounding, or you can close yourself up a bit when you need a little more privacy. If you need even more privacy, this solar cell panel above the doors can go down, meet the connector here, and then turn your window into a wall. So you can really change your space from a completely open space to a completely closed space. At the same time, at all these places for the folding doors, the units can be connected. And in that way, you can expand units and get a bigger space by putting units together. You can do that both for collaboration, if it's different people using different units, but you can also, by adding functions and functional spaces to them, you can turn it into a house or whatever kind of building you need. And as you can see, you can combine them in, this is just a few of the examples. Also, the units they actually have a square corner. We are allowed to use squares, we just have to have a really good reason for doing it. And here was a good reason, because this allows us to make a bigger central space when you put 4 units together and open it up completely. And you can combine them all the way up to, here's an example where there are a house of 112 square meters. These units are organized to form a micro-society where people can live, work, interact, and perform in new ways. And this is a few shots showing what kind of environment they create. They are designed so they are very different according to where you see them from, the angle you see them from. And that way, when they're put together, they don't look like one unit just being copied, but they look like a bigger, more coherent structure because of that. And of course, also we integrated the energy production in the units, so they're going to be developed to be able to work off-grid as well with some energy storage. We have an energy box. You see one. Well, that's not one on that picture. But anyway, here's a few model shots of one setup from the city. Just oh, there's the energy box with all the energy technology in it. Then the next project I'm going to show you is the Ant Lab project. Ant is our almost new center for architecture, new technology and design here in Aarhus. And they wanted a flexible way to, I'll speed up. I'm almost out of time. To exhibit. And we created this lab for them. That is a new folly that also integrates some seating and stuff that is situated around a 20-foot container that can open all the side. So in that way, we kind of took the very square basis of the container and then battled it with these new structures. So in that way, ripping it out of the boxy environment and into a new kind of space where you can do new kinds of exhibition and interacting. And then the last project, I'm just going to show you very briefly. This is one of our newest and more regular building projects. It's a leisure activity house in a small community north of Hobro in Døstrup. The basis of the house is a big room where we put all the functions into the room at different levels and then connect everything with a ramp going around the room, which kind of looks like this with the big space, the functions, and the ramp going around. And it's just a few shots from the outside. Also integrating a lot of new connections between the outside and the inside. So all the sports and activity fields are closely integrated with the house, and you can use this house in a lot of different ways. Also, this is a house thought for all the inhabitants of Døstrup, not just for the children, but also for the seniors and the families and everyone. So it's a very flexible house that can change the functions over the day. And that was all for today, so thank you very much for listening. If you want to contact us, you are more than welcome. We have a wemakespace.dk and a wemakespacewordpress.com. And if you want anything, send me an email at info@wemakespace.dk. Thank you.